but IT firms are not losing as much as the rest of the market is. It's also in the news today because French IT services firm Capgemini is all set to acquire US-based Igate in an all-cash deal for $4 billion. Capgemini will increase its foothold in North America, thus increasing competition for Indian players overseas. Now, how big a threat will this acquisition prove to be for the Indian IT space? We've got Sudhin Apte, CEO and Research Director at Offshore Insights, joining us. Sudhin, good afternoon. Sorry to keep you waiting. We were listening into the Maruti management, and earnings season tends to be a bit time unpredictable, so to speak. But what do you make of this Capgemini acquisition, and really what kind of additional competitive pressure it may put on some of India's IT majors such as TCS, Infosys, etc.?
Sure. Personally, I feel that this deal is more about Capgemini and Igate than really industry impacting deal. Capgemini, which otherwise has a series of challenges in terms of, its home geography not growing, margin being very thin, and limited headcount for their size in India, I think sees this as an opportunity to build the scale on global delivery side, as well as also possibly, increase their margin. So clearly an interesting a deal from Capgemini perspective. Igate on the other side, had not been heading anywhere. It's sort of a failed experiment after, Igate bought Patni, not really growing, not really, winning any large deals. So I guess, it's a sort of a suitable deal for both of them. Clearly, as an outcome of this, Capgemini's position in the competitive landscape improves because now they have more than 100,000 resources in offshore location. But on the hindsight, I also see an opportunity for Indian providers, especially given sophistication or lack of it with Capgemini in terms of front-end sophistication for articulating global delivery, its strength in work transitioning and managing offshore engagement possibly still lags compared to Indians. And the companies such as GE, UBS or Royal Bank of Canada, who have stayed clear from Capgemini for last 12 to 15 years, possibly won't get forced march to Capgemini because they just bought Igate. I believe that in the mid to long term, it possibly can create an opportunity of $300 to $500 million revenue shift from current Igate to players like TCS, Infosys or Tech Mahindra.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're saying, in fact, this deal might end up benefiting Indian IT as opposed to adding to the competitive pressure that Indian IT will face. Let me put my question to you this way. So
I think it's a mixed bag. Surely there will be competitive pressure because there's one more player. But, if the deal was struck by, say, a large American company, it would have possibly put far more pressure on Indian companies compared to Capgemini, which, in a way is a complex organization, very French-driven or European continent organization. And what makes me interesting about this conversation, or looks interesting, is, all through executive commentary, Capgemini is talking about North America, not really Europe or continent, where their headquarters is.
Okay, fair enough. We were talking about this internally, and it's a question I'd like to pose to you as well. Do you see this as a missed opportunity for an Indian IT company? Did you envisage that maybe a TCS or an Infosys, going out on a limb to buy a company the size of Igate would have added to their market share presence at all?
Oh, no. I don't think any Indian company would buy, 1.3 billion revenue at 4 billion market value. Also remember, Patni's large clients, the names that I had mentioned earlier, or some of the names like, Fujitsu, Hitachi, EMC, are all shared by some of the players that you mentioned, especially TCS, Infosys, and to some extent Tech Mahindra. So not only that, also in most of those accounts, be even the, Patni Igate's largest account, GE, they are not the top players. The challenge with Igate is they are not strategic providers, possibly except to Royal Bank of Canada, to any clients, and they're typically third or fourth largest provider in that account. So I really don't see any reason for Indian companies to buy another fellow Indian company just for scale. So I don't think this is a lost opportunity, especially at a $1 billion valuation.
Okay, so then, there have been some very chill winds blowing through IT, or Indian IT especially, over the last few months. There's a degree of disappointment in the earnings themselves. But besides that, there are now questions being raised on how well poised Indian IT majors are to face this big transition to, a digital facing business, so to speak. Now, I know all of them have put in effort to get that part started, but what's your assessment? Have we missed the bus on this one? Do you see Indian IT taking at least a couple of years to build specific skills in these areas, and therefore earnings continuing to be under pressure, investments moving up over the next few years, etc.?
I think, there are 2-3 points that come to my mind, and, we have been working with 450 North American companies who use offshore as a key services destination. I think, what has happened is most Indian companies thought, social mobility, analytics as an opportunity to grow and put all baskets in that. Or today, if you go to homepage of any Indian IT company, you will see digital all around. I believe that, the challenge with Indian IT companies is, the strategy and corporate planning functions are somewhat, weak and unrealistic. They are going behind the, themes which contribute to 3 to 5% of their revenue. That's a point one. Point number two, I think they're very risk averse. So, as cloud and SaaS posed a great opportunity for them, it also created risk for their enterprise application and infrastructure practices. That risk remain unmitigated. So today, if you see that numbers which are, shrinking for some of the providers like Infosys or Wipro, or putting huge pressure on margins for companies like even TCS, the primary reason is their infra practice and their enterprise application practice are not heading anywhere. They're not going because they're losing business to cloud and SaaS application. So if client buys enterprise application, there is an implementation revenue, there's a possibly SI revenue and custom development revenue. But if a client buys a SaaS application, none of these three things exist for Indian providers. So there is surely the lost opportunity from perspective of a digital or emerging technologies, and the primary reason for that is inability to take risk, inability to go and do something out of the box, and somewhat, if I can little aggressive term, somewhat herd mentality.
Okay, so then good afternoon. So just to take that point forward, in that case, over the next 3 or 6 months, will we see a lot of inward deals? I mean, a lot of Indian mid-cap ITs being taken over? Maybe in the next 3 or 4 quarters.
No. I'll repeat what I said at the start. I actually don't support the thought process that, a large Indian company will buy a mid-tier Indian company. See, remember, most, if not all, most Indian mid-tier organizations, small organizations are somewhat struggling. They don't have any clients which are not shared by, TCS or Infosys or Cognizant. So really their clients are known to them. So what is left is really employee base. And general thought process, right or wrong, general thought process that I have seen in my interactions with C-suites of Indian IT companies is that they don't buy for headcount and the buildings.
I mean Indian companies being taken over by their foreign counterparts, some of the global MNCs.
I think, the large two Americans, that's IBM and Accenture, possibly are done with their scale in India. Capgemini was one which was talking about building the scale further and lacked the scale compared to especially Accenture or IBM, has done this acquisition. So the remaining is, really struggling Europeans and Japanese. And unfortunately, with the Japanese companies, be it Fujitsu or, any company, we haven't seen really that aggression to grow the scale in India. So I think, what we have seen in the last 3 or 4 years, 1 or 2 acquisitions every 2 or 3 years, not of this scale also, but, $200, $300 million companies getting acquired, we'll continue to see at the same pace. I don't think that we are going to see a flaring up of M&A activity in Indian mid-tier.
So then one final question on my end, and that is, you were talking about SaaS, etc. We've heard all of these companies talk about it, whether it's TCS or Infosys. In your assessment, based on the management commentary that you hear, the client interactions that you do, whose strategy is poised, in a better place in that sense? So who's more strategically...
Well,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a little long-term answer, and in light of a recent quarterly earning, this may not make much sense. But I believe that based on hundreds of interactions with the client, in the lot, TCS is clearly ahead of others from multiple perspectives. Their interface with client have increased a lot. Their alignment with what they want to sell or they are selling versus what clients are looking for and the value clients are looking for, there's a far more alignment. Their commitment and investments in automation, especially getting projects faster and cheaper, is well appreciated by client. And I think the client trust and the relationship that TCS account team enjoys actually is superior than many other providers. So I do believe that for next at least 2 to 3 years, TCS is fairly well equipped in a large camp.
All right, so then we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for those insights on what's going on with Indian IT, especially on that big deal that took place today, Capgemini and Igate. Now,